researchers?
Well, it took place about 10 years ago at the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John Kennedy on on November 22nd, Friday, November 22nd, 1963. So in 2013, I had a lot of students who wanted to look at uh, the idea of trying to do research and to do Zoom broadcasts and different things like that. Now, we base the idea of next generation researchers on a quote from President Kennedy's inaugural address when he says, it was a cold and snowy day in January 20th of 1961. President Kennedy was the youngest man elected president, not the youngest man to be president, but the youngest man elected president. And he goes without a hat, and he's very athletic, and he's very dominant in giving his speech. Let the word go forth from this place and time to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by hard and bitter peace, proud of their ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which the nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of our liberty. I thought then those were powerful words in 1961. I thought it was real powerful in 2013. It's even more so today.
So it was one of the Kennedys who inspired you to create this.
Oh, yes.
Speaking about the Kennedys, didn't you recently go to one of his rallies in the area, correct?
Yes, I was able to attend the rally in Bastrop on September 24th, and it was amazing. It was an old time type of campaign rally, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Could you describe what he was like?
Oh, he was very engaging, very personable, had charisma. He was just the type of person that you could actually believe in and believe the words that he was saying.
What do you mean?
Well, I believe that he's a different type of person because he seems to tell the truth, which most politicians are very guarded about doing. He'll tell things that a lot of people might think, but most politicians do not say. And I'll give you a couple of examples here by asking you a few questions. Lillian, what is your dream?
I want to earn my college degree and become a lawyer.
Okay, now to do that, you'll have to probably take out a lot of student loans, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, now do you realize that by going to school for 4 years and then going to law school for 3 years, your student loans may be the same price as a house payment?
Yeah.
Okay, now can you afford two houses on your salary? And that becomes a question for a lot of people. Most students today have given up the idea of owning a home because college loan payments are so high. Do you want to find yourself at age 35 or 40 still living with your parents or grandparents?
No.
Okay, and the only way that Robert Kennedy was talking about that yesterday, and he made a lot of sense. We're going to play that in title later.
Isn't that for you?
Okay, do you know why?
Because the American dream is dead to people now.
Okay, explain to me why you think the American dream is dead.
Because young people have lost hope and feel that the future is more of the same, dark, dismal, and full of danger.
Okay, you gave me three Ds. I like the alliteration. Could you explain a little bit more about why you think that there's no hope, or why do you give up hope?
Because I would like to. I'm sorry.
Okay, now let me ask you a question. Okay, why do people give up hope?
Because they're not being given any like motivation or support.
Okay, now you see this picture behind us here. This is actually a picture of Oshkosh. Oshkosh is a area in which there was fighting for one day, and then basically the people of Oshkosh had to give up their arms and quit fighting, all because the press are trying to say that this country is a breakaway province of Azerbaijan. Now, the truth is, this is actually given by the 28th president of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, to the country of Armenia. And when they say that internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, this is a part of what we're going to be talking about, and hopefully getting to talk to Robert Kennedy Jr. later about why it's so important to actually know the truth, know your facts, and have a good education policy. I would really like to invite Mr. Kennedy to address us in those questions, and I would invite him to have a serious dialogue with you on the program on 3 different topics. First, I would like a central topic about the Aktosh and Aktosh as an American problem. As I was speaking a little bit more, and we had the picture in the background, it was actually given to Armenia by the Treaty of Sevres in 1920. And the binding arbitration of the signing partners was the 28th president of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. So Woodrow Wilson drew up the arbitration, given it to them in November of 1920. And then we had 2, or actually 3 illegal treaties. And we'll talk about that later. The Treaty of Moscow, the Treaty of Kars, and the Treaty of Lausanne, all of which negated the Treaty of Sevres, which is actually the only one that was signed by the original legal governments.
But aren't those countries?
Well, exactly. They were countries now, but they weren't countries then. And as astute lawyers will try to tell you, they basically had no standing to make an agreement with international people on that basis. So they can't take away another treaty. So the case of Aktosh is a perfect example of that. This is where where Robert Kennedy Jr., who's running for president, can help us. We're asking him to come on and talk a little bit about this. He plans for education, his plans for genocide awareness, and he calls to strip mining of the United States.
What?
Yeah, in his speech yesterday, he's talking about how the country is being strip mined of all its assets. And I'd like for the people to actually listen to what he had to say, because this is totally fascinating. I've never heard the idea of strip mining. I know what strip mining is. It's taking raw materials off the ground and basically, doing all kinds of pollution. I've never heard it when it comes to the economy and people actually strip mining assets away. And he'll talk about all kinds of stuff. So if we would like to, we'll enjoy his comments, and we'll get to listen to his speech.
Okay. Welcome. Welcome, Central Texas. I'm Roger Warbacher, the National Field Director for the Kennedy for President campaign. Next, President of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Jeff Hutt and Ron Toy. And Bill Nessemeyer, our North Texas coordinator, Renee Rush, our Region 12 coordinator, Antonia Placini, the Travis County coordinator, Jack McGinnis, Region 10 Hill Country coordinator, Bill Dembinski, Denton County coordinator, and I'd like to introduce Central Texas coordinator, Moody Hurd.
How's everyone doing? All right. It's really an honor to stand up here today and introduce a man who is a growing source of inspiration and hope for people across this country and across the state. He's a man who's dedicated his life and his career as an author, an activist, and an attorney fighting large corporations on behalf of regular Americans. If you're anything like me, you know something's not quite right in life in 2023. It's no longer a secret. It doesn't feel like our government is working for us. It doesn't feel like a government by the people or for the people. And I actually, something that stuck with me recently, one of our campaign leaders here in Texas said something. She was a young woman back in the 1960s when Mr. Kennedy's father and uncle were working alongside other civil rights leaders. And she said it felt like that we were about to put the government back into the people's hands, and then we lost that because our leaders were taken away from us. For over 6 decades, the Kennedy name has been synonymous with civil rights leadership and guardianship of the American dream. And for the first time in my life, I feel like we have a real chance of putting that back into the highest office in this country. So I have a question for y'all. Who wants to see a Kennedy back in the White House? Introducing Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Thank you, Rudy, and thank you all for coming out here, and thank you, Amanda, and this amazing band. Thank you for entertaining us, and while we're all waiting, that was just wonderful. And Rudy was talking about how so many of us feel like our government has been taken away from us. And one of the things that allows that to happen is that they have us, this kind of orchestrated polarization that we have in this country. We're more polarized today than at any time since the American Civil War. And that polarization benefits the people who are in power. And so much of the anger that we all have for each other against Republicans and Democrats and blacks and whites and immigrants. So much of that, of the issue, what I'm finding when I go across the country is there's more issues that we have in common than there are that are driving us apart. And that is what the purpose of my campaign is to try to find that common ground with Americans. And what I find is most of us agree on 80 or 85% of issues. And the ones that we don't agree on are like the jangling keys. It could be important issues, guns or abortion that people feel strongly about, but the anger about them is orchestrated. And it's like somebody jangling the keys over here and saying, everybody watch this. And they're robbing the bank over here. And they're stripping us all of our wealth. And if you have a king and queen who are looking over the parapet of their castle, and they see all of their subjects fighting each other, they go back into the party and they pop champagne corks, because they know that nobody's coming over the wall for them. And what this campaign is about is getting us all directed, so we are going to go over the wall. And 3 weeks ago, I was in San Francisco, and as part of the campaign, and I lived in San Francisco for the better part of a year in 2018, when we were trying the Monsanto cases. We had about 2,000 cases of regular Americans, home gardeners. The first one was a African-American school superintendent from San Francisco, whose job was to spray Roundup on the weeds. And all of them had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from Monsanto. And we filed about 2,000 cases, and the way that multi-district litigation works, you try one of those cases at a time, one after the other, until the company finally says, okay, we'll negotiate. And we tried 3, and then Monsanto came to the negotiating table, and we settled. At that point, where there were 40,000 of them. I ended up living in San Francisco for most of the year. And every morning I would go down to Union Square to work out at a gym before I went to court. And Union Square is like the Fifth Avenue of San Francisco. It's where all the big shops are. They have all the iconic American stores, like Macy's and Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's and Gap and Old Navy and Levi. And then the big foreign brands like De La Valle and Prada and Gucci and Burberry and all of the and Hermes and all the other ones. And people come from all over the world, from Asia, etc., to go to San Francisco to shop in those stores at Union Square. When I went back to Union Square 3 weeks ago, it's all gone. Every one of those stores is now shut down. It's just acre after acre of plywood. It's as if all of Fifth Avenue in New York was shut down, the stores were all closed. I went to communist countries when I was a kid, and went to Cuba many, many times. It's like visiting there. These are, it's like in communist countries, there's no shops, there's no stores, there's no retail. And that's what San Francisco looks like today. It's just it's a city, this extraordinary city just obliterated. It has a 35% occupancy in the business district. And the reason is that the chaos on the street, on the homeless population. And I spent a lot of time over the past 3 weeks, because of that sort of traumatic experience of trying to understand what causes homelessness. My son Connor pointed me to a writer, a researcher, called Matthew Desmond, who's written an iconic book called Addicted, and he's done a lot of research, particularly on the homeless in San Francisco. And what I was wondering is, we have 525,000 homeless people in this country, but half of the unsheltered homeless in our country are in California. It only has 12% of the population. And my assumption is that homelessness is associated with drug addiction, it's associated with mental illness, it's associated with extreme poverty. And that many of the people in San Francisco who are homeless are people who became homeless elsewhere, maybe in less advantageous climates like New York, and they didn't want to live to sleep on the grates in the snow. So they go to San Francisco, where they know that everybody knows that they have a very, very generous social service system. And we hear, and people in San Francisco believe, and when somebody is homeless in Austin or Dallas, and the police pick them up off the street, they don't bring them to jail, they put them on a bus to San Francisco. I don't know if that's true. That's what they know in San Francisco. But Matthew Desmond has done this extraordinary research where they actually went out and did questionnaires and interviews with thousands and thousands of the homeless in San Francisco. And what they found was the people who are homeless in San Francisco are almost all from San Francisco. They weren't imported there. And that it has very little to do with drug addiction or homelessness, in fact, or poverty. West Virginia has a much higher drug addiction rate and a much higher poverty rate, but it doesn't have a homeless problem. Detroit has a higher drug addiction and poverty rate, but it doesn't have a homeless problem. So what is the cause of the homeless problem? And what Desmond shows is that the single most important cause is the price of housing. San Francisco has the highest price housing in the country. And and California has the highest priced housing. An average home in Los Angeles is $815,000. That means to live there, you have to own that home, you have to earn $250,000 a year. But what Desmond shows is that what's happened in California, what's happening in San Francisco, the social disintegration, that is so obvious there, the economic collapse, that it is like a tsunami coming across the country. Because the price of housing has gone up so dramatically. And 2 years ago, the average price of a home in this country was $215,000. Today it's $400,000. And the interest rates on a home have gone from 3 to 7% during that period. So, I have 7 kids. One of them is 39, and he has a house. But the other ones are between 20 and 32, and none of them are thinking of getting a home. because it's so out of reach. For my generation, and many of you look like you're around my age, but we understood the American promise was that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could finance a home, you could have a summer vacation, you could raise a family, and then you could put something aside for retirement on one job. None of my children believe that that promise is available to them. You know, they would be happy if they could pay their student loans. Buying a house is completely out of any understanding for them or any of their friends. And, you know, we all know kids that age now who are living with their parents. And we don't know, not too many of us know kids that age who are actually buying a home. When I was that age, me and all my friends were at least thinking of a strategy of where we wanted to live and the kind of home we wanted to buy. This generation, we've completely betrayed them. That is completely out of reach for that generation. Why is the price? And by the way, home ownership is critical for our democracy in so many ways and for our country. If you own a home, you care about your local community, you care about your school system, you care about the hospital, you care about the police, you care about the appearance of your street, and your block, and your home. It gives you also an entree into capitalism. Because if you own a home, you have equity. You can borrow against that equity if you want to start a business, even a little business like buying a sewing machine. Or if you want to bet the whole ranch, you do that on a retail outlet or a restaurant, and you can do that. And I lived in a period of time called the Great Prosperity, when the American middle class became the greatest economic generator in the history of mankind. When my uncle was president, our country owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. We were the greatest exporter of goods in the world. We had it, everybody wanted what we had. They wanted when I traveled abroad with my dad, people wanted to buy my blue jeans and strangers would come up. They wanted transistor radios that were made in the United States. They wanted RCA Victrola record players that we made. Our cars were the gold standard car in the world. And they wanted something bigger than from our country. They wanted our leadership, and they wanted a moral authority. And all of that began with a housing boom that was launched after World War II with the GI Bill and with other legislation that made sure every American could get into a home. And that allowed everybody to borrow money and to build businesses and to fulfill their entrepreneurial energies. But now we're going in the opposite direction. And why is the price of housing climbing the way it is? Well, part of it is inflation. You spend $8 trillion on wars. You spend $16 trillion on COVID. That's $24 trillion. They didn't come to us and say, we're going to tax you for all these wars. They don't have the courage to do that. They just did it, and then they print money. When you print money, it still gets paid in taxes, but it's a stealth tax called inflation, which lands on the middle class. And so everything is now inflated. The price of food is going up, of childcare, of health, and of housing. The price of housing is going up faster than anything. Why is that? The reason is there are three giant corporations: BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. These are the biggest corporations in the world. BlackRock alone has $10 trillion under management. The state of California has a GDP of $3 trillion. And BlackRock is more than 3 times that size. The state of California is the 5th largest economy in the world. So BlackRock is bigger than almost any country. And the CEO of BlackRock is also on the board of directors of the World Economic Forum, which gathers a billionaires boys club that gathers every year in Davos to plan life for the rest of us. And they call their big plan the Great Reset. And Klaus Schwab, who's the director of the World Economic Forum defines that and says that what that means is that you will own nothing and you will be happy. Oh, and they're on their way to achieving that first part of that. Those 2-3 corporations, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, which all own each other, so it's really one large corporation. Together, collectively, they own 88% of the S&P 500. So they own everything in our country, and now they've decided they want to own 2 more things. They want to own all the farmland, which will give them control of our food supply, and they want to own all of the single-family homes. And they're on a trajectory now to do that. Within 6 years, 60% of the single-family homes in this country will be owned by corporations. So when your kid goes out to buy a home, you all have heard of stories of or know somebody who's going out to buy a home and they're about to sign the contract or go into escrow, and somebody comes in at the last minute with a cash offer and takes it off the table. And you try to find out who is that guy, and it turns out to be an LLC with an ambiguous name. But if you follow the breadcrumbs, it's going to lead you back to BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. They're buying everything. And we are headed toward a colonial-style economy, a feudal aristocracy, or corporate kleptocracy, where these very, very powerful entities own our land base. Thomas Jefferson said, American democracy, if it's going to survive, has to be rooted in tens of thousands of independent freeholds owned by individual Americans and families. And what we're moving towards is the aristocratic model that we fought the revolution to escape, which is large landowners and own all the homes and all the businesses and all the land. And we become a nation of renters. We become, instead of citizens, we're subjects. We are serfs on our own land. And this is not a good thing for America. And this is when all of these Republicans were on their debate, 3 weeks ago, and they're all talking about, the stuff that's 40-year-old arguments. We're going to be tough on women, we're going to be tough on Mexico, we're going to be tough on trans people, and all of these things. None of them mention what's really happening in this country, which is this strip mining of the equity from the American middle class by these giant corporations. None of them are talking about this. They completely missed the point. That's why people in this country are so angry, because everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows that something is really wrong, and they feel like it's being rigged, and they're right. And the political class is not recognizing it. And so people feel that they're being betrayed. The average wage, I'm running against 2 candidates who both served a term in the White House. And they're running on the idea that they brought tremendous prosperity to this country. But when I go around the country and talk to Americans, I'm not hearing that. In fact, I'm hearing that when they hear that from President Trump and President Biden, they feel like they're being gaslighted, because what they are experiencing is the opposite of prosperity. It's a disintegration of our economy, of our way of life, of our values, of our mental health in this country, of our physical health. They feel like they're being mass poisoned and mass propagandized. And the average wage in this country is now $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs of food, transportation, and housing. So if you just meet your basic needs, at the end of the year, you're going to be $5,000 in debt. The average American is going to be $5,000 in debt. How are they handling that annual deficit? They're putting it on their credit cards. Then last month, we hit the world record by far, $1 trillion in personal credit card debt in this country. Nobody ever experienced anything like that, $1 trillion. And the credit card companies are charging them 22% interest. If the mafia did that to you, it would be called loan sharking, and they would go to prison. But if Visa, MasterCard, Wells Fargo, Morgan, Chase, and Citibank do it, it's just business as usual. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And so, like I say, they're doing it right in front of us. And nobody, there's no debate on this, political debate in this country. It's verboten. Newspapers don't talk about it. During the COVID lockdowns, they shut down 3.3 million businesses. Those are the businesses that aren't on the S&P 500. Those are the businesses that are owned by people like you. That's the one they closed. They closed all the churches. They kept the liquor stores open, and they kept Walmart open, and they kept Amazon open, so that we all.
Victor Davis Hanson back at the ranch.
Okay, we're back again. What did you think of that, Lillian?
I think that his speech is actually really beneficial because he mentioned that the candidates now for presidency are more of working for the government to benefit the government and who they work with, rather than actually work and benefit the people of the community who make the government that it is. And so his whole speech was him focusing on the aspect of bringing us people together rather than keeping us separated as the presidents have been the past few years.
Now, if we are able to get Robert Kennedy to actually come on this broadcast and ask him a few questions, and we talk about some foreign policy, we talk about the strip mining of resources and stuff like this, why do you think Mr. Kennedy is running for president? Why do you think that he would bring a new life to especially younger students?
Because I feel that he is going to take off where the late John F. Kennedy left off before his passing, and I think he's going to go more in that aspect of where he was heading towards, rather than continue going how the government is now. And I think that's really going to be beneficial for us because they're going to focus on the conflicts that the society is bringing to this for specifically my generation for the upcoming years. For once, when we have to start buying our homes, going to college, and just being more of an adult.
Yeah, it seems like to me it was a clear message to try to help out all people, no matter what age, but it would really help out people your age as they're beginning their careers, because we need to make some sort of change here in the United States. Also, a part of his plans, and we'll talk about this more later, but part of his plans is to be very transparent when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, and we're just not doing that at all. So until next time, goodbye from
Lillian, bye.
Bye.